What up, Rippers? C Captain Coots. I'm here today to present part 2 of my 3-part series. This is the Time Flies, Life Dies, Phoenix Rise PowerPoint project. So the album itself was released by Canibus and Bronze Nazareth on May 12th, 2015 on RBC Records. It's available through iTunes, Amazon, Best Buy, or your local music retailer. So if you haven't picked up a copy of the album already, please do. It's my favorite Canibus album to date. If you haven't listened to part 1 of my series, I suggest that you check that out as well. There I go into a bit more detail about the project itself, what I'm looking to accomplish, and why I'm undertaking the initiative in the first place. So I will touch upon both those items briefly here, just to summarize. Before getting into the tracks themselves. So, in terms of the outline, I want to present a high-level review and analysis of the album under 3 key themes. So this is part 2, the Life Dies theme, which kind of encompasses tracks 9 through 13, which is the second interlude up to Give Me Not Control. And what's important to remember is that I feel that each theme can be studied in relation to 3 specific perspectives. The first being cannabis, the second being hip-hop culture, and the third being global events. As to why I'm undertaking this initiative, the first purpose is to build upon the existing reviews and provide a more thorough analysis of the album from a cannabis fan's perspective. As I stated in part 1, I felt the initial reviews were very underwhelming and really didn't get to the heart of the matter in terms of what the album was trying to communicate. So I thought I'd take the time to put this together and to give everyone, as I said, a more detailed analysis of the album from someone who's really familiar with the music, not in terms of just listening to the albums and all of Canibus's material, but as a mixer myself who kind of enjoys going through the lyrics, chopping them up, and rearranging them to create new songs and to kind of further expand Canibus's catalog and to kind of help build upon the infinite mixing concept. So I guess in this part here, the Life Dies part, I will be talking a bit about some ancient and occult knowledge, because I feel especially the second interlude is directly related to some of those ideas. But in general, the understanding of ancient and occult knowledge will not be heavily covered. But in some respects, it is unescapable, and I'll get to a bit of that more as well in part 3. So, again, the second reason why I'm undertaking this project is to demonstrate constant support and to bring these discussions into wider discourse. I feel it's especially important with an artist, an independent artist such as Canibus, who has faced such resistance in terms of getting his music out to his fans and into the wider public, that the onus is really on the fans to step up to the plate and go to bat and to kind of help share these ideas and to help promote the material. So I wanted to kind of do my part to kind of help support Team Canibus, and also hopefully to inspire other Rippers to do their part and kind of build momentum to build momentum for subsequent releases and things of that nature. So one thing I will read in full is the disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in each presentation represent those of the author and do not reflect the official policy or position of Canibus and his team. I reserve the right to adjust my personal stance based on the attainment of new knowledge, information, and facts pertinent to the information contained within. So I guess please note, as a warning, there may be some casual swearing. I'll try to censor myself as much as possible. And also, I know I do have a tendency to speak quickly, so I will try to speak slowly so that the information is communicated well. And finally, again, I am recording these back to back, so if my voice gets a bit raspy, then please know why and try to be understanding. Alright, so without further ado, let's get to the tracks themselves. So this is the track 9, the second interlude on the album. I've taken the liberty of typing it out in full, and I've bolded a few points just to touch on them in a bit more detail. The first, again, now you are interceding on the destiny of the person next to you. I had a bit of a chuckle at this because I feel some Canadians like myself have a bit of a head start in this regard. We're kind of always ribbed for saying sorry too much, but for me, at least from my perspective, I just try to do my best to be responsible to those that I have direct contact with. I don't think some people realize that if you're being an asshole or a dick to someone, that can really kind of have an impact on how they kind of conduct the rest of their day's business. And a lot of people do take that to heart and take it home with them. So I feel just having a bit even more self-awareness with those that you have direct contact with, I think it can go a long way to improving relations and how we communicate with one another. So something to keep in mind. The second point I wanted to touch upon was the algorithmic future. So algorithmic, it can be defined as a finite set of unambiguous instructions performed in a prescribed sequence to achieve a goal, especially a mathematical rule or procedure used to compute a desired result. And algorithms are the basis for most computer programming, a set of instructions for solving a problem, especially on a computer. So I think this relates to the ideas of cycles of time, and so by this discussion, by at least how the way this is worded, the next phase of the sequence is already set in stone. And a lot of people, and Canibus himself has kind of made the point that that life on this earth, we're kind of all part of one giant computer. So I think the way this is worded, again, if you fear the algorithmic future, you may respond too slowly to that information, which will liberate you and help you proceed towards self-realization. So I interpret this to mean that if you understand the concept that we live in kind of an algorithmic world where the next step of the cycle is kind of already in place and there's nothing that we can do to change it, but the way that we're acting currently is kind of inhibiting us from getting to that next step, which is why we kind of see, everyone says history repeats itself. Well, it does so for a certain reason, because we keep making, in some cases, the same mistakes that our ancestors have made in terms of trying to improve life as we know it on Earth. So if we're able to respond to that information and change the way that we act, then we're able to proceed to the next step and change our way of living as a result. So, which I'll get into more detail in a little bit. So in terms of the snare that's personally growing around you, I think this can really be taken down to an individual level, and just in terms of saying, like, have you ever put yourself in a situation that you knew would negatively help you, so that would have a bad impact on you? And for me, it was actually returning to a job that I knew that was bad for my health, but I felt that I needed to return because you have to, quote-unquote, make a living for yourself, which I find kind of odd in the first place since we're already alive, but we have to still make a living for ourselves. But that's besides the point. So I guess moving on, in terms of the art of self-mastery, and I guess the direct experience of the extraordinary, again, in a lot of kind of ancient and occult teachings, they say that nothing is gained without sacrifice. So for me personally, I've been lucky enough in some cases to have had actually direct experience with the extraordinary, because there's been that friction that I've had to face with myself in terms of being in a situation that I knew was bad for me, and then ultimately making a decision to leave that position, even though the short-term gains were be considered minimal compared to what I would be gaining if I stayed in that situation. So I guess in my experience, the experience with the extraordinary, it meant that actually I had to spend time in the hospital, but that's also a distinct possibility when you're kind of towing a fine line between this reality and the next. So again, I think that's a story for another day, but suffice to say that if you're able to kind of escape our present illustrations of reality, then you can really see what is possible, or what is really attainable if you're just kind of able to shift your mind a bit and change the way you think. So again, these are all stories for another day, but I really wanted to touch upon, I guess, this interlude in a bit more detail, because as the last lines indicate, that open-minded and aware individuals can easily be some of the most reckless and indignant. I can honestly say that I've been in that crowd too. I know I have been guilty of being reckless and indignant, and even though I knew I was right in a lot of respects, the way I proceeded was poor, and it resulted in my message kind of being obscured. So knowing that, I can now take steps to repackage my message to kind of serve the right intentions. And so for me, it's all about kind of work on oneself, and this is something that I've learned from reading and trying to practice the teachings of G.I. Gurdjieff. So this kind of goes on to kind of the second part of what I want to discuss with regards to the interview, or to the interlude, in that the term life dies, it has multiple meanings. It does not strictly pertain to the physical body, but it can also kind of describe our way of life or our natural body. And this idea is captured in many ancient teachings, and the ones that I've kind of studied the most were those of G.I. Gurdjieff in the Fourth Way. There are numerous references to this esoteric or occult knowledge and Canibus's material, most notably in Poet Laureate 2, which is filled with references to the Fourth Way, and also on For Whom the Beat Tolls and Fait Accompli. These teachings and this knowledge is kind of discussed in some more detail. So in this table is taken from P.D. Uspensky's, who is a student of Gurdjieff's, his book In Search of the Miraculous, and it kind of just shows that I guess the humans kind of have these different bodies within them. The physical body, the astral body, the mental body, and the causal body, and then that these kind of terms are reflective in other religions around the world. So it's kind of just his system is just a different way of describing kind of these same concepts. So I just want to kind of to bring this to your attention, just because I feel that again the term life dies, as I said, has multiple meanings. So it doesn't just mean physical death, but it also means kind of in a more kind of spiritual sense, or kind of the way that we currently live. So moving on to the next track, track 10. This is Rome featuring Pirate. So this track is a reworked version of Black Rob's track Whoa off his album Life Story, which was released in 1999. And Canibus and Black Rob actually have worked together in the past. They both appeared on Yvette Michelle's DJ Keep Playing, the Blackout remix, released in 1997. And this is also shout out to Black Rob, most notably on 100 Bars and on this track itself. So in terms of this being a reworked version, I think it's more so than just that Rome and Woe kind of sound similar. But on the Black Rob track, he says, "Yo, when you see something ill, that's whoa." So in that track, it really like represents kind of material items, women, kind of among kind of those among similar veins there. But in terms of Rome, I think ill means ailing or something sick. The track doesn't hide the direct connection and parallels between ancient Rome and the current United States of America. So I guess to put it in another way, you could say that many of the statements made in the song wouldn't be out of place in the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that both empires underwent or are undergoing a period of great moral decline. So kind of harking back to kind of my political science background, I think you really need to kind of talk about the United States and as a hegemon. And so states that achieve hegemonic status do not retain this status indefinitely. So this is kind of a principle that applies to all past empires. Like for instance, the English Empire of Great Britain. I guess you could say that again, like their empire or their hegemonic rule came to an end for multiple reasons, but overexpansion was one of them, and that played a role in founding the country that I currently call home. But regardless, so it just kind of the idea that empires do not always maintain their power and influence. They will eventually fall. So just to define some of these terms better, like hegemony is a dominant state that uses its military and economic power to establish global rules and institutions in accord with its interests. And it does so by two means. The first, hard power, which is a reference to traditional measures of power, such as economic capability, population, and especially military strength. So for the longest time, the United States has been the leader in hard power. But in more recent years, the rise of China has especially kind of threatened the U.S.'s role as a hegemon in regards to hard power. Because China's economy has been growing, its population exceeds that of the U.S., and thus its military strength, it can be considered greater as a result. But where the U.S. is still really dominant is with regard to soft power, and that is ideological attractiveness, culture, information capacity, and education. To this day, people from all over the world, intelligent minds, flock to the United States, because due to its ideological attractiveness, the culture, and the ability to really develop both in a business sense, but also educationally as well. I see this in my country as well, in Canada, how it's really difficult to establish a Canadian identity because we take so much culturally from the U.S. And even though we share a border, but the U.S.'s soft power, it expands across oceans. That's why you're seeing McDonald's in many foreign places and things of that nature. Like so the U.S. is still, with regard to soft power, is still very much the global hegemon. But there is competition, and for years now, even since 2003 and the invasion of Iraq, political analysts have been claiming that the U.S. As a hegemon, their role and influence has been declining. But again, it's 12 years later, and the country is still going on fairly strong in terms of those metrics. But as we see, or as we've learned from history, as I said before, again, empires do not last indefinitely. But what really causes me some concern is when and if the U.S. does fall, what comes in its place, or kind of the transition period between the U.S. kind of becoming or going from the world power to kind of a more secondary power. What impact does that have on the citizens? And in some respects, we're starting to see some of that already in terms of the more tightening grip that the police and law authorities have on their citizens. Not seeing this just in the U.S. too, but we're seeing it in Canada as well. And so these ideas are something that really need to be kind of considered. And especially as I'll talk about a bit more about in part 3 in terms of the Phoenix Rising, because that in itself has dual meanings on an individual and a global level too, in terms of the rise of new world orders and things of that nature. So again, I'll definitely come back to this in part 3, but I wanted to kind of bring up this more kind of political discourse now, just to show that, again, this is a bit deeper than just a connection between the U.S. and U.S. and Rome. It's about kind of the rise and fall of empires and those who kind of dictate kind of the more kind of the rules and kind of how we operate globally. So these are things that are kind of hard to capture in kind of a normal album review, but in kind of formats like this, we can kind of go into a bit more detail. But actually, before I go on to the next track, I do want to shout out Pirate. A lot of the mixes that I've done to date have been over Pirate Music Production. He's a very talented artist, so check out his website there and support him if you can. So shout out Pirate. So going on to the next track, Matt Black Rapana featuring Bronze Nazareth. So Canibus's verse on this track, it really displays his belief and practice of Eastern philosophy, and I think what always stands out is references to prana which is a Sanskrit word for life force or vital principle, and it refers to a cosmic energy believed to come from the sun and connecting the elements of the universe. So other cultures kind of describe this as life force, ki, mana, or simply energy. So that's why when I said at the beginning that the terms of life dies, it doesn't just mean physical life. It means in terms of, again, of how we're living, and also can also refer to, again, other Eastern philosophies and their practices and beliefs and things of like reincarnation and things like that. So again, in reincarnation, again, it doesn't just have to be dying and coming back as another being, but it could just mean, again, changing something kind of fundamentally about yourself. And then, as a result of that change, you proceed and you live your life differently. So, moving on to the next point, you don't understand what I'm saying, be honest. So, Canibus is addressing kind of like a main critique of his music that it's hard to access or digest. And kind of going back to Gurdjieff, he once said that I bury the bone so deep that dogs have to scratch for it. So, the idea of work on oneself is central to Gurdjieff's teachings, because he went to great lengths to increase the effort needed to read and understand it. And I feel that Canibus has adopted this kind of mindset when it comes to his music. Because emceeing in the manner that he does, like sharing knowledge or ideas with enhanced vocabulary, and sometimes in multiple languages, is a way for this to kind of challenge himself and his fans through music. Which is something that I appreciate as a fan and a consumer of hip-hop music, because he's not dumbing it down for the sake of sales, but he's testing himself as an artist and making it difficult for me to really to grasp what I'm saying. Like it's a great mental exercise just trying to decipher what Canibus is trying to rap about and what he's trying to communicate. But the more effort you put into it, the more you get out of it, which is again something that I'll touch upon in part 3 in terms of energy return on energy invested. Moving on to the next track, Mr. Montana, track 12. So if you're not familiar, Nazir Montana is the founder and manager of Conspiracy Worldwide Radio, which is a weekly kind of podcast that has interviews with a lot of underground artists, and we also talk about a lot of interesting items and events kind of going on throughout the day. Or not throughout the day, but throughout the world, I should say. So the opening vocal sample, I think, is likely taken from the May 17th, 2014 show, in which Canibus was scheduled to appear for an interview. And so on the bottom right-hand corner there, I've included some examples of Canibus's appearances on CWR, whether it be through music or through interviews. So definitely check those out. The website's there, or you can also find them on iTunes. So the track itself kind of describes the deteriorating state of underground hip-hop and compares it to the downward spiral of global affairs. And in fact, multiple statements in the song have roots in what Biss has communicated in his interviews. So things like that there's no unity at the bottom of the pyramid when it comes to hip-hop, and you can see different class structures within it. That the mainstream kind of really forms the top of the period. Then there's top of the pyramid, and there's the middle class who are still able to make a living off the music and to have good exposure. And then the most populated area is the bottom of the pyramid, but it's also where most artists have the most difficulty in terms of making a living off their music. So the fact that there's no unity at the bottom of the pyramid makes it more difficult to really, again, make a living off your music and to get your messages heard. Other statements in the song and themes in the interview include, again, a lack of substance, again, no one willing to step up to defend tradition, brown nosing, the withholding of royalties, and kind of the infiltration of corporate interests in hip hop. And one thing that I've always respected about CWR is that it's one of the only media outlets that has let Canibus freely speak his mind on the issues that affect his life and musical career. And And in particular, the May 14th show and the July 13th show in 2011, those were actually really responsible for kind of engendering a lot of empathy for me towards Canibus and the struggles that he faces to make his music. So whereas some people kind of focus on how he kind of presented or how he kind of shared his feelings on the matter, for me, I'm like, well, if something must be really wrong if this person is getting so worked up and so kind of is really fed up with the kind of not this treatment, so to speak, but just with kind of these obstacles and barriers that he has to face just to get his music out, then like this is a really fucked up situation. So that's why I say it kind of really engendered a lot of empathy for me, and in fact, like his appearances on the show, they're the source for kind of many vocal samples on Plume mixes, including a lot of my own. So I'm hoping that Canibus makes another appearance on Conspiracy Worldwide Radio soon. It's always nice to hear what he's got to say. And I guess thank you, Montana, for supporting Best like you do. So moving on to the next track, Give Me Not Control. So the opening quote, give me control of all the world's media, and I care not who they choose to let entertain them, is referencing a quote made by Mayor Amschel Rothschild, pictured there, who's quoted as saying, permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws. So the vocal samples make it clear that this track is kind of a commentary on the corporate interests that finance hip-hop, and thus to kind of direct the culture towards any path that will make them the most money. And for me, I think this marks the death of hip-hop as an organic culture, something that I guess that even Nas spoke about in 2006, but I think is even more evident today, because it really affects the message artists deliver in their music. And I think both hip-hop media outlets and labels are culpable in this development. So in terms of the media outlets, blogs, which are now a major vehicle for the promotion of new music, they're owned and operated by biased entities. Blogs rely on advertisement and revenue to partially finance operations, and this has an impact on the stories or music presented and how they're covered. Because it's all a matter of how do we increase page views. Because if you increase page views, then you can go to businesses or to people seeking looking to advertise to your target audience, and you can say, you need to pay me more because I'm bringing more people into my website. And if they say your brand there, they're more likely to buy your products versus anyone else's. So you should pay me more. So that's why, again, you always have to be kind of a bit skeptical when it comes to blogs and how they cover music, because whereas a lot of them maybe started out as like they're fans of hip hop in their own right, but a lot at the same time, like they can choose which music that they present. And I've actually taken the initiative. I've tried to contact a few of them in my time just to help promote Canibus's material, but often I don't see the results. Even though I feel that this is music that needs to be spread to a wider audience, but often my messages are ignored in that regard. So that's why always skeptical of blogs in terms of, and I'm aware of the role that they play, and kind of the as I said, if to put it harshly, the death of hip hop as kind of an organic culture. So I guess further on this point in terms of hip hop media outlets is the XXL freshman lists. They're regularly criticized for its featured artists, and some don't even want to be featured just because it has such a poor reputation for not kind of being accurate or not promoting artists or music that really need to be heard, in favor of artists that either are on prominent labels or kind of are speaking kind of about more accessible themes that the magazine or their website can really profit off of. So, and I guess just to summarize, at least for media outlets, again, they do play a role in creating and propagating false narratives. One example that I saw recently was when Two Dope Boys, they covered the release of the Battle Buddies for Life video. And at the end, they made a remark about Canibus once again dissing Eminem. Whereas if you were to ask me, then that would, I guess I would present that a lot differently, because I view that whole situation a lot differently compared to the average hip hop head. Whereas it's something that Eminem started, and kind of a subliminal debate is currently ongoing. That it's not kind of one sided. It's just that Canibus is more than willing to call him out by name, whereas Eminem is kind of resorts to more subliminal attacks and doesn't come out and say Canibus's name outright. So again, there's as a Canibus fan, like the false narratives is something that's incredibly frustrating, and blogs and kind of the more kind of generalist attitude, kind of wanting to be more on top of kind of the scene, kind of knowing what's going on or who the new hot artist is. Kind of a lot of the more important kind of facts that really impact artists' career kind of get overlooked and kind of pushed to the side, because they're not willing, or they don't have the time to kind of dig deep and to kind of really to find out everything that's involved in a certain situation. So, but that's enough about the media outlets. The labels themselves, they sign talent based on their ability to generate sales and have the power to withhold releases or poorly promote albums from artists that they seek to separate from. I think, at least for Canibus, a good example is 2000 BC. I think it was pretty clear near the end that both the artist and the label wanted to kind of separate ties, but again, they needed to get that last album out as part of the contract, and Universal didn't really do their part in terms of promoting the album. And that kind of really puts the artist kind of behind the black ball, behind the black ball, so to speak, in terms of establishing the next steps of their career and how they kind of move forward, because the last impression that's left in the fans' minds is an album that either didn't sell as well as it could, or was promoted poorly. So people wonder, it's like, oh, where have you been? It was like, no, I've been making music all along, but you just kind of haven't looked for it, or those in the culture haven't kind of did their part to kind of make sure that you know that this is kind of being that I'm still making music and these albums are being released. So I guess suffice to say that again that both media outlets and labels have played a significant role in shaping, I guess, what hip hop has kind of really turned into. I guess versus kind of its more kind of intended purpose back in the 80s and 90s. So I just wanted to also talk a bit more about this track. It's one of my favorites on the album. So, just want to say again, like with advances in technology, like artists can bypass traditional media outlets to kind of connect directly with fans. So, and this can work to kind of minimize the influence of hip hop media for some consumers. But however, the advent of social media has negatively impacted our ability to communicate clearly. I do have a Twitter account. Again, you'll know if you've watched part one of this that I do promote it. I don't use it too often, but I can see myself using it more in the lead up to future Canibus releases, because unfortunately it is the major way to communicate across borders nowadays. It seems like, or it feels like in a lot of respects, that you don't have a voice if you don't communicate online, or if you don't have an established online presence. So if you do choose to communicate through social media, then you really have to be cognizant of making sure that you're communicating clearly, and you're doing it in such a way as to, I guess, how should I put this? As to really reflect your position. Like I have been guilty in the past of taking a bit of a more aggressive approach on social media. Again, as I said, even though I thought I was right, the way that I conducted myself probably really obscured the message that I was trying to portray or to get out there. So I guess learning from that lesson, like going forward, I'm trying to at least to be a bit more calm and composed when I'm using those outlets, because it's very difficult to communicate in that medium. Oftentimes, I feel if I'm typing a tweet and then I publish it, and then like a few minutes later I don't like what I said, so I kind of want to edit or adjust things. So you have to really be certain that once you kind of communicate in that fashion, that you truly mean what you say, and you realize that the impact that it has just on the individual you're communicating with, because again, a lot of people do take these things to heart, and it's important to them. So you gotta really watch what you say, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, for lack of a better term. And also, finally, I guess there are a few references to Poet Laureate Infinity and the Infinity concept on here. So I feel, if you ask me, that the Infinity concept, it can severely impact the industry as it stands today, and this has placed cannabis in a more difficult position as a result. So I'm sure I can probably dedicate a whole another presentation to this alone, and we'll probably do so kind of in the lead up to Breath of Jacker 2 Infinity, should it ever come to fruition. But Infinity, it really gives the fans the power to become artists themselves by recreating or reproducing the music of their favorite artists ad infinitum, or for however long, for eternity. So the two quotes that I pulled were, at the moment the phoenix rises from the ashes, magic, my quantum cycle continues in infinite patterns, and then finally, signature signs at the end times, 1 ducentillion rhymes. I couldn't imagine if the amount of bars that the Rippers have created from Poet Laureate Infinity. There's got to be thousands upon thousands of mixes over like 3 days of material. So so when you really think about it, it really expands Canibus's initial catalog, which is massive in its own right. So again, so by giving kind of the fans the power to become artists themselves, again, they can really kind of focus in on supporting their favorite artists, and can play a big role into to kind of help to spread these ideas, and to help spread the music, and to kind of help promote future works, which is what I've tried to do with some of my mixes to date. And because, again, even though getting into cannabis's kind of career later in life, I always found it difficult to kind of comprehend how, at one hand, you have some people who will adamantly argue that cannabis is the illest, and then whereas conversely, you'll have other people argue that he's not a good MC, and why do you even bother listening to the music? So that's why I've kind of included the graphic on the right there, which is like the scientific method that's mirrored. So you have, again, your observations turn into a hypothesis, which turn into your predictions, where you do your tests, and then you resort to your tests, and then you come to your own theories. So it seems like, coming into this after the fact, people have kind of already had their own theories in place. So the only really way to kind of figure out who's right, or which side has more sway, is to do the tests. So that kind of attitude, or that is kind of what I try to take with my mixes, is to kind of prove, or to kind of show that Infinity is something to be reckoned with, because even as it has today, it's played a role in developing artists such as Pirate, aka Complex. It's a way for fans to help train themselves, and to help to get at least a bit more into hip hop. Because personally, again, like I do consider myself a hip hop fan. Before I was listening to Canibus, I went to 3 straight Rock the Bell shows. I was on the bus 14 plus hours to go to attend those. I went to the Home and Home show, Jay-Z and Eminem in Detroit. I've been to countless local shows, but I can safely say that I didn't really feel like a true hip hop head until I finished my first mix, and like it meant that much to me. It brought tears to my eyes when I finished my first mix, when I kind of got that last couplet in place, and then I played it front to back, just knowing that I accomplished something that I'd set out to do, and to support an artist that has a big impact on how I see hip hop, and how I kind of view the world. It meant a lot to me. So that's why I'm so passionate about this, and I feel so strongly about the Infinity concept, and want to do my part to get this stuff out there. So with that being said, I'll just kind of summarize part 2, the life die section of this project. So in terms of from Canada's perspective, the term life dies has multiple meanings. Again, it encompasses the death of the physical body, in addition to the death of the natural body or a current way of life. sacrificing musical accessibility to further the boundaries of artistic integrity and challenging oneself, which is something Canibus has demonstrated throughout his career, which is very evident in terms of changing his style so dramatically, from the Can I Bust days to Michael of the Curriculum and Rip the Jacker, to Cloak and Dagger, For Whom the Beat Tolls, and then to Fait Accompli and Time Rise. Time Rise, Life Dies, Phoenix Rise. Like, each album's different in its own right. And again, I see it as a way for the artist to challenge himself and his fans at the same time. So from the hip-hop perspective, the term hip-hop is dead, or that perspective is reinforced by the artificial versus organic growth of the culture. And the lack of substance or staleness of underground hip-hop is also very much present in this part of the album. And the idea that hip-hop media could become extinct if fans and consumers took more initiative or interest in their favorite artists. So with regard to global events, the Rome and U.S. parallel and the idea that American hegemony will eventually decline, but again, at what costs? The decline in morality affects all facets of life, not just entertainment. And that commentary on the ever-increasing role of social media in disseminating information and our inability to communicate clearly as a result. These are all kind of ideas that I see in this part of the album under the Life Dies theme, and then from each of these perspectives. So with that, this brings part 2 to a close. Again, that's kind of my contact information there, so you can get at me on Twitter if you want to talk about this in more detail, or please feel free to leave some comments in on the YouTube video, and I'll respond there in kind. You can check out my SoundCloud for all my mixes, and yeah, if you haven't, go support the album, Time Flies, Life Dies, Phoenix Rise, and be on the lookout for part 3 of the series. So thank you for listening, and till next time.